Jessica here with Joyful and Simple Designs. Today we're going to be making this patio chair. I'm really excited about this project because our dog destroyed the set that we had. So we definitely need an upgrade. Let's get going. Now for this project we're going to be using 2x4s and 2x6s. Now I'm going to start off by prepping my 2x4s and my 2x6s. I highly suggest you use cedar and you won't have as much prep work if you get high quality cedar. I am going to sand down my boards and then stain them, so I have a tarp underneath because stain can get a little messy. I'm not using cedar just because I had a lot of extra wood at my house, so I'm going to use what I have. So I'm going to have a little bit more prep work. I'm going to have to sand all the sides pretty well and then I will stain. I'm using an orbital sander and 120 grit to just smooth out these 2x4s a little bit. Now that our wood is all sanded down, we're going to stain it with an outdoor stain. It just protects it better from the sun, and if it gets rained on, it will last longer. I'm using an outdoor stain that matches some wood accents at my house, and I'm going to wipe it on, and then I'm going to take a rag and wipe off any excess and then let it dry really good. Now the first side of our boards are stained, so I'm going to wipe all the excess off, then I'm going to let them dry, then I'll flip them over and do the other side. Now that our wood is prepped, so we have it sanded and stained, we're going to cut all our pieces out. There's a lot to cut out for this project, so I'm not going to go through each board, but I do have a cut list on the membership group, so make sure to check that cut list and it will walk you through everything you're going to need for your chair. We do have two boards that are going to have an angled edge, so I am going to walk you through that. This is a mitered angle, so I am going to move my swivel, and the angle is going to be 22.5. So I'm going to cut off this edge and then we'll do our next cut. So we're going to have two boards exactly the same, where only one end is going to be at an angle. So from our longest point on that angle to our next cut, our length is going to be 22 inches and 3/16. So I'm going to mark that. So this next cut is just going to be a cross cut. Only one side is going to have the angle. Now, since there's so many pieces for this chair, I'm gonna just cut everything out and then I'm gonna organize it by section and then I'll assemble it by section. So a couple things before we start assembling. I am using a couple sizes of screws. So the first size I'm using is 2 1/4. So these are deck screws. They have a T25 bit. And then I'm also going to be using some 3-inch deck screws. I am going to pre-drill all of my holes and then I will be drilling all of the screws in. I am going to be starting with one of the sides. Now when you build the second side, it will be built exactly the same. So after you build the first side, you can do the second and they should both work. Double check your sizes. You don't want to mix up the wood. And so for the top of our side, this one is 30.5 inches. We should have 3 2x6s and these measure 27.5 inches. And then we should have 2 2x4s at 24 inches. So my longest 2x4 here is going to be our armrest, and I'm going to take our other 2x4, so these ones measure 24 inches, and they are going to be screwed in at the ends of these. If you have been woodworking for a while, you are more than welcome to use a pocket hole jig. If you have used one before, then you know what that is. If I were to use one, I would come in from the inside, make our pocket holes right here, and then screw in that way, and then you wouldn't see your screws. But we also have a lot of beginners in this group, and I don't mind seeing the screws, so you will be able to see the screws with how we are building this, but I don't think they'll be very noticeable, so I'm not too concerned. I am going to pre-drill 2 holes from the top on this board. Now I want my screw holes pretty even, so I'm just gonna make a dot that way. All of the holes are pretty close to the same spot. Now I want this to be really sturdy, so here I'm going to be using a longer screw because it has more to hold. Now I'm going to do the same for this side. Now I'm going to add my 2x6s. So these are going to give us a lot of support. I'm going to start on this bottom. And I'm just going to have these lay flat. So I'm going to make sure that this board is flush with this bottom board. And I'm going to make 2 holes where I want my screws to go. So it's going to be towards the bottom of this board because that's where our 2x6 is sitting. we're gonna add our two other 2x6s, and I'm gonna start with the top. We want these to be nice and snug. I'm gonna drill my pilot holes, and then I'll put the screws in. Okay, we're gonna add this third support piece in. And our gap should be 3 3/4 inches. This is our, now we have our first side, and now we're gonna do this for our second side. Next, I am going to assemble the back of the chair. So we need our 2 pieces with our angled edge. So those are, we're 22.5 angles, 22.5 degrees. And our back support pieces are 16.5 inches. So when we put this together, we are going to lay this all flat, but we want these back pieces to be up front. So we're gonna flip these over. So our top piece is gonna be flat, and this angle is going to sit on our seat. So we're going to screw in all these pieces together, and I'm gonna start with the top piece. So again, I'm going to put pilot holes in, and then I'll put the screw in. And I will be using these 3-inch screws still. These 2 top pieces should be flush with each other. I'm gonna just work down this first side. Between each of these boards, I'm gonna have 2 inches. So I'm just gonna measure out, place the board where it's supposed to be, and I'm gonna drill all this side first. I have this first side all screwed in, so I'm just gonna flip this around so that I can get to it from this edge, and I'm gonna do the exact same thing. I'm gonna drill, measure 2 inches, make sure the gap is good, and then screw in again. Next, we are going to assemble our seat. We're going to be using 2x4s that are 27.5 inches and 2x4s that are 23 3/4 inches. Okay, to assemble these, we want our 2 longer 2x4s are on end, and then we are going to be screwing these in on top. So when we assemble this together, we want to make sure that these first boards are really, really square. So I'm just going to take my time to line these up. We really don't even need these on yet. So we want it flush on both ends. And I'm going to screw in from the top. I'm going to again pre-drill and then put my screw in. going to do this other side. Same thing. Make sure that your boards are flush on both ends. I'm going to come down and do the bottom board. I'm just going to make sure that this end and this end is flush. Now I'm going to come in and place the rest of my boards. And there should be 2.5 inches between each of these boards. So make sure you measure it out. And you also want to make sure that these are going to be flush. So if you have a board that is just a little bit too long, make sure you cut off that edge. So it might just be a sliver. And so you can come in with a measuring tape and just put a mark at 2.5 inches from this board. And that way you know where your ends will go. And then we'll do that for the rest of these. So mark at 2.5 inches, put your board on and screw it in. So we should have two sides, a seat, and the back. So all of these sections are pretty heavy, so this chair is going to be really heavy when we're all done. You might want a second pair of hands just to help hold anything. It's just me today, so I am going to start by putting one of my sides down. And I'm going to take my seat and I'm going to place it in here. So this is our bottom. And this is our bottom, and mine is not fitting in. So I am going to sand one of these edges down. Theoretically, it should fit in, but after we tighten everything up on these boards, then sometimes we lose a little bit of space. So this board should be flush with the top of our middle board. And I'm just gonna come along here and screw these two together. This is when we're gonna use our shorter screws. So I'm gonna use two 2¼ inch screws here, because if I were to use 3, we would most likely see the tip at the bottom. Okay, this is when it's going to get challenging, because now it is a little heavier and we need to put on this next side piece. I'm just going to use a hammer to scooch this top part in a little bit. because again, I want this top part flush with our middle board down here. And I'm going to come in again and pre-drill holes and screw in our screws. So I'm going to flip this over. And now is your chance to decide if you want this to be the front or if you want this side to be the front, because we're going to put our back on, and at this point it doesn't matter too much. The next steps are a little trickier. I got a cushion set off of Amazon, so I placed it in the chair to measure how far back I wanted my seat. So I ended up having the edge of my back piece flush with this bottom piece. So I clamped this together so it would stay. But if you have another person, then that will help you hold everything together. And I'm gonna put some screws in through here. So you're gonna wanna just make sure you're really careful on where you place your screws, because you do not want them to come out. And then I'm also gonna place some screws through the bottom right into this board. So our last step is to stain these ends that we had cut. And I am also going to just spend a little time and round out these corners with a sander. That way I don't have any sharp edges. Now I didn't think I would mind the screw holes, but I do. I'm not a big fan. So I am going to use some wood filler just to fill them in. And so I'm gonna fill these in, let it dry, I'll sand it, and then I'll put just a little bit more stain over. While the wood filler is drying, I am going to put my cover on this cushion. I got this cushion off of Amazon, and I was looking for a heavier duty cushion because my kids and my dog are pretty rough on stuff. So I love that this has a cover so I can take the cover off to wash it. I wanted this to be a really tight fit because I didn't want this to come off the chairs that we have now. My dog just completely tore apart. He takes the cushions off, so these ones should be secure. If you filled your holes, we're gonna sand them down. I'm gonna take my extra stain and I'm just gonna touch up those spots.